everybody, Jason Blaha here with Ice Cream Fitness. Just eating a little bit of chocolate candy. In the middle of my cut. Got to make sure I get some quality food in, as I have pictures coming up in less than 2 weeks. Alright, what I want to talk to you about today is the importance of dietary fat in your diet, both for muscle gains as well as overall health and just wellness in general. Again, dietary fat really gets a bad rap a lot of times. There have been a lot of fad diets that again try to have you eat insanely low fat, very low fat, or cut as much fat as possible out of your diet. And again, a lot of this has been based upon bad research over the decades. Trying to link things like saturated fat with cardiovascular disease, things that have been pretty well disproven in the modern world, as well as this whole concept that fat is fattening, or even trying to break everything up into good and bad fats. And again, as I covered in my video on healthy food versus unhealthy food, outside of something like trans fats, there are no bad fats. There are almost no bad foods that are just inherently bad in isolation and outside of the context of your total diet, meal plan, and overall lifestyle. And what actually makes you fat is excess calories. It's excess calories, whether they're in the form of protein, carbs, or fat of any type. That's what contributes to body fat gain. That is where your body fat comes from. And they're all equally capable of doing it. I mean, some things like protein, it is more difficult to gain body fat from protein, but it can happen. It is biologically possible. I won't get into all the specifics and the biochemistry of that today. I might do a video on that, breaking down how the different micronutrients become body fat and how they contribute to body fat. But basically, the evidence is pretty overwhelming that it is surplus calories, regardless of form that is to blame, not directly dietary fat. So that being said, I guess the questions you might have are, why do you need fat in your diet for both health and muscle gain? First of all, I mean, you need fat in your diet to survive. There are basic metabolic functions that require certain fatty acids. I mean, and if you do not consume these, which again, the essential ones are, omega-3 and omega-6. If you do not have any of these in your diet, you will die. Plain and simple. If either of these is at zero for any prolonged period of time, you'll die. And even having them too low or having them too far out of balance with each other will cause all sorts of health problems. I mean, everything from inflammatory issues to, problems with organ damage, nerve damage, nerve degeneration. I mean, these things can happen if they get too low, organ damage. So there are problems with this. So again, and if your dietary fat is too low, you are risking becoming deficient in some of these essential fats. Two, you need dietary fats to absorb some of your vitamins and minerals. Again, you have 4 fat-soluble vitamins, and if your dietary fat's too low, particularly if your fiber intake is too high, and again, for bodybuilding purposes and fitness purposes, people tend to eat very high fiber diets. And again, you're actually risking leaching some of those fat-soluble vitamins out into you and excreting them in your feces. So again, this is a problem. Again, if your intake is too low. And then on top of that, all of your sex hormones are produced from lipids, and that includes your testosterone. So again, if your dietary fat goes too low, particularly in a caloric deficit, both men and women see reduced production in sex hormones, and sometimes it doesn't return after you increase the fat in your diet or increase the calories. Sometimes that prolonged low-fat, low-calorie diet causes your production to remain low for quite a long time. I mean, it could take months and in some rare cases even years to recover from. And again, your testosterone levels are linked to muscle gain and performance. So again, if your production goes too low and you're not getting that testosterone into your body through some exogenous source, then your muscle gains are going to suffer. Your performance is going to suffer. So the question becomes, how much dietary fat do you need? What percentage of your diet does it need to be? And like I pointed out in the protein video, you do not and should not base your diet off of percentages of your calories. You have minimums of different things you need, and that's what you need to follow. And you do not need to concern yourself with the actual percentage of your diet that it's made of, because oftentimes this leads to surplus and deficiencies depending on where your calories are. And it's just not the wise way to go about it. All right, the general recommendations for people who want to maintain a healthy hormone balance, a healthy testosterone production, proper absorption of vitamins, you usually want to eat a minimum of 0.4 grams of fat per day for every pound of body weight. So for a 200-pound male, because that's an easy one for us to convert, that's about 80 grams of fat. That's your minimum. Now again, as long as it's not causing problems with your overall dietary balance, there's no reason you can't increase that higher than 80. You can go as high as you want, within the confines of balancing your diet. However, I wouldn't go below 80. Now, I will say that, again, for people who are not on hormone replacement therapy, they're not using anabolic steroids, anything like that, and they are producing all of their own testosterone, I would say for short periods of time, for cutting, you might be able to go as low as 0.3 grams per pound of body weight. And, and again, the hormone drop will be minimal. It will still be there, but it'll be minimal. And you can do that for cutting purposes, but for bulking purposes, I would not recommend that. Otherwise, again, you're risking gaining less muscle mass because your hormone production is lower. So those are the numbers. That's what you should shoot for. And and again, that's just even for the cutting purposes, it's just for getting nice and lean and ripped. That's not pre-contest. A lot of pre-contest bodybuilders drop their dietary fat even lower. But I do know some natural bodybuilders who've done that, and they suffered huge drops in their libido. They lost muscle mass, and it took them months to recover and get their sex drive back up to par. And again, the question I would ask is, what's the point of being lean and ripped if you're not competing in a show, and being attractive to the opposite sex, or if you swing the other way to the same sex, if you can't even get an erection and have no sex drive. Again, it seems kind of pointless to me. And again, the other thing to consider is there's no need for you to concern yourself with what types of fats you're getting, if they're healthy or unhealthy outside of trans fats, because again, you only need a minimal amount of the omega-3 and omega-6. It's very easy to get those just from eating basic foods. Omega-6, it's almost impossible to be deficient at. It can happen, but it's rare. Maybe someone who's like a raw vegan or raw fruitarian is going to develop that, but for most people, if you're eating any type of varied diet, it's just almost impossible. As far as the omega-3s, if you eat fish, you're in the clear, and if not, you can supplement a few fish oil caps a day, and you can reach your needs for that. So again, that's not really a problem. And again, we know now that saturated fat isn't really particularly bad. As long as caloric surplus isn't too high and the rest of your diet's balanced, it doesn't really seem to cause health problems. It doesn't cause any extra fat gain outside of its caloric value. And it actually seems to help a bit with testosterone production. So again, there's no need to avoid this and try to figure out which fats are clean or dirty, or good or bad. Other than just generally trying to avoid trans fats. And I hope this has been informative for you, and I hope that you learned something. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask, and I might make a video to answer your questions. Let me give you guys a bicep shot, and I'll talk to you next time.